This video is about the color ultramarine blue and why it's a must-have on my palette. All right, stay tuned. Here we go. Okay, so let's take a look at ultramarine blue for a minute. So right from the tube, it's quite dark. Here it is with a little bit of water added to it, and then some more water, and even some more water. So you can get at least 3 or 4 different values from ultramarine blue, which is a transparent color. Now, I talk often about not wanting to use just water to get to the color value that I want. That mixing for value is really important in order to not have a washed out painting. So I've put a drop of Naples yellow on the paper as well. And I'm going to demonstrate with a number 10 round how you would make, say, a cloud formation, starting with the dark. Usually a cloud is dark at the bottom. There's some rose coming in on top. This is dry paper with wet paint going on, mixing into wet paint. And there's Aurelian at the top. And that's one way that I like to use ultramarine blue. Not for clouds necessarily, but for those kinds of forms. It blends nicely, so you can get it works nicely in a triad of a dark, a medium, and a lighter color. And when they meet together, they can create form. In this case, it creates like a cloud-like form, but I could have made it a hard edge form. It could have been, say, the roof of a building that's in the sunlight. All right, now let's take a look at a cup, which is a little bit more hard-edged form. And I would use that triad and ultramarine blue the same way. I also could use ultramarine blue with a red rather than a rose. But these are about cheese strength, or if I had a darker color, I could go any strength I want with the ultramarine blue in order to make these triad forms. It's just that ultramarine blue works so well in a variety of different subjects. So, and as you've probably seen, I usually start, when I'm doing a triad, I usually put in the darkest color first. That's so ultramarine makes an appearance first, then to the red or the rose, and then to Naples yellow. All right, so there's another example where I tend to like sort of softer shadow forms rather than the harshness of dark forms, but it depends on what the subject is. So let's say the subject was 2 barns in a very, with some brighter light on them. Again, I'm going to pick ultramarine blue. It's usually my go-to, and put it on the dark side. It already has some red in it in this case. And you can see it makes a dark side to the barn. Now this is a case of not being matchy-matchy. You know, the barn, if it was red, probably was a dark red. Or if the barn was brown, that probably was a dark brown. I don't like to match color as much as I like to match value. And I've talked about that in other videos. And there you can see how ultramarine blue, while it's still wet, is very willing to accept, say, a green and incorporate it. So you end up with these wonderful moments where you don't have one color starting and one color ending, but where there are these continuous sort of volume forms. And I think that's kind of the way the world really is when we looked at it. You know, when you look at grass, it's not one color, it's many colors. And watercolor just is able to simulate that really, really well, especially if you squint your eyes and just look at volume and form. That's still ultramarine blue with a little bit of green in it. But look at all the different colors I've gotten with ultramarine as the basic base. So many places you can go with it. It's just so versatile. Now I'm going back to the cloud. You wet all around the cloud, and I'm putting in some sky around it. Just wanted to show you that if you have a bulbous form like a cloud and you still want to have a blue sky, this might be one technique for getting that effect. If you look at Winslow Homer's paintings, he does that a lot in his Bahama pictures. I'm not pretending to be Winslow Homer by any means, but when he has those floating forms, take a look. That's what he does there also. Now I'm going to dry everything, because one thing that beginner painters tend to do is want to keep adding color while things are still wet, and that will not make things darker. It just muddies the forms. So everything was dry, and I applied a little bit of ultramarine blue in a thin layer where I wanted to accentuate that moment. Now I want to show just a really brief example of, again, that issue of thinking that if you keep putting this more and more layers of the same color on top of the same color that you're going to have a darker color. I mean, in essence, that's true, but let me show you also how it's false. All right, so there's number one. There you can see 2 strokes, and then 3 strokes, 4 strokes. Now I'm drying in between each one, but watch how the value doesn't change very much. Okay, there's 3. Okay, that's 3 strokes. So the top one is 1 stroke, top second is 2, 3. Let's see. We'll get to number 4. Okay, number 4. It's starting to tip a little bit now. It's starting to get darker, but it's taken 4 strokes to get there. That means 4 passes to get there. That's a lot of passes. All right, and then now we're going to be at 5, and then finally at 6. When you get to 6, it's almost about where it is when it comes out of the tube. But, you know, if you're making that many passes to get your value right, then you probably called your value incorrectly in the first place. And if that's the case, then better to take something like this. There's a small dab there. It's might be hard to see, of say a Prussian blue. If you know that you want to get to a really dark place, then go to Prussian blue first. Ultramarine blue is not the place you want to start. Ultramarine blue is more is always going to be lighter than the Prussian blue. Prussian blue is also quite staining, and I used it there really briefly, but I only use it very briefly because it's very easy to overuse Prussian blue. It's the same value as the number 5 is of the ultramarine blue, but has a much more dulling effect. So there's a little bit about ultramarine blue and why it is so super important to me, and it's a must-have on my palette. So remember to keep the whites of your paper white, your paints wet, mass for value, mix for color, and the next color that I'm going to do a little brief series on like this will be probably a red or a mid-tone. All right, see you next time. Bye-bye.